a written production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.
Everybody sat down immediately. If it's there, I'll get your attention.
Okay. All right. I'd like to ask everyone to take their seats so we can get started, please. We got unruly board members. Start beating on the table.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
This is not a social like
All right. Okay. I would like to call this planning session to order. I'd like to start by making the announcement that the Ad Hoc Bylaw Committee has dedicated countless hours over the summer to accomplish this task. I would like to ask that the committee members stand and be recognized. Yeah, and the board members, obviously committee members. All right, thank you. All right. At this time, I'd like to turn this meeting over to the ad hoc chair, Alan Lenevsky, and the co-chair, Kat Fimmel.
Thank you, Vice President Agee. Can we bring up the PowerPoint, first page of the PowerPoint? Thank you. We were tasked as a bylaws committee into reviewing and reforming or rewriting the bylaws. And we did that. We did it over about 6 months. Next slide. I'd like to introduce the committee members and have them stand. And they're going to be speaking later, and they can answer here. All of us are here to answer any questions that you have. I was the chair. Director Fimmel was vice chair. And then, and you know us both, and we had Janet Curry, who is not here, but will be participating from phone as a member. Patrick Gannon, would you please stand?
Yes,
Carmel, Sharon Brock, Stella Van Ness, and Dave Weiland. These people spent over 100 hours each meeting every week since about March into September. And I think they deserve some applause. Also working closely with the committee, spending countless hours, was Judge Ray Charnocky. Okay, I'm bad at names. Our attorney reviewed everything. Our attorney reviewed everything, Jim Hinton. And Marcia, will you take a stand? She helped us tremendously. Without all these people's participation, this could not have been done. We had a selection process in which, going into it, the board and myself and Director Fimmel did not want clones of ourselves. What we wanted to do was have a diverse group of people with diverse viewpoints to get together, work respectfully, and come to some type of consensus if possible, and we did that. This is a consensus document that you'll be seeing. There is one minor dispute, and that is on whether or not a person running for office needs to attend an orientation or not. I'd like to go to slide 5. And then I have a couple other comments, and I'm going to hand it over to Director Fimmel. There are many of the bylaws that were not controversial. And they're still not controversial. There were some parts of the bylaws, and I think we all know who they are, some of them, that were very controversial. And one of the things that was very controversial was there was 5 motions that were made at the annual meeting. And all of those have been dealt with. That does not mean that everybody agrees with it. Compromises were made on it. But again, this is a consensus document, and everybody on the committee said that they could live with this and wanted this stuff passed. One of the things that everybody was in agreement early on, and was actually brought to the attention during the campaign last year as an issue by Director Nowakowski, was that people felt that there were numerous items in the bylaws that should be policies. The committee agreed, and we have pulled out in our recommendations large amounts of the bylaws to make them policies. And one of the things that I want to point out, just as a way that this has to go, is if we are going to change the bylaws to remove the policies, we have to vote on the policies beforehand. In other words, if you pass the bylaws and you remove the policies and there's no policies, then they don't exist. So the order of the vote's going to have to be for the policies, which we'll discuss later, and then pass the bylaws. Today, one of the things that everybody agreed on early on in order to be able to make progress was that the committee members would be able to say today to the board at any time what they thought. If there was any dissent, if there's anything that they want to change, if there's any questions they want to answer, the committee is free to do so. Again, we have a consensus document, and they can explain themselves what they think, and after the PowerPoint presentation is finished, each one of them will be given an opportunity. One of the things that one of the things that I think should be considered is that, did this move it forward? In other words, a year ago or 6 months ago, there were a lot of people who were upset with a lot of the bylaws. So in viewing it, I think it has to be viewed as, did we make progress or are we going in the wrong direction? I believe we made a lot of progress, and I believe it's a workable document. In a review of the bylaws by members of the board, a number of grammar errors were found. Those grammar errors are being fixed. In other words, we don't have to go over them one by one. We're aware that there needs to be some fixing of the grammar, and we're going to do it. So what you're seeing today is the second to last document that will be introduced. Another question that has come up that I want to deal with, and then I'll be quiet for a while, is the bylaws and the articles, some of the sites in them don't match. So the articles might be referring to something in Article 3 of the bylaws, except it doesn't match. We sought legal advice on that, and it is my understanding that that can be fixed, not by going into the bylaws on stuff, but by having a table of articles versus where you say Article 10 is now Article 3. So it can be done basically administratively like a table of statutes that the legislature does. With that, I'll hand it over to Director Fimmel.
Thank you, Director Lenevsky. Can everyone hear me? No. So as Director Lenevsky said, in fact, he's probably covered most of what I'm going to say, is before we could draft any bylaws, we first had to review the existing bylaws to determine what was a bylaw and what wasn't a bylaw. So the first run through was to remove anything that was not a bylaw, which then was put back into the policies. Did we change the slide? Okay. So that created a new policies document, but part of what the Bylaws Committee was chartered to do didn't include reviewing policies. So the policy document in its present form hasn't been reviewed. So at some point, there will have to be a review of the policy document. But that current document in place will have to be voted on before we can vote on the new bylaws. Next slide, please. So basically, the categories of what was removed from the bylaws document and turn back into policy includes, and you can go to the next slide, includes BP 1, 2, 3, 6, 8, 9, 16, 20, 21, 24, 27, 31, 33. I believe that's correct, Marcia? And 12. And so there'll be quite a task ahead of someone to review and revise the bylaws. I'm sorry, the policies. We can go to slide 9. As the committee proceeded with its work, it gave much time and reflection to the comments and recommendations that had been made or brought forth by the membership. One of these is a reduction of the quorum. In the proposed revised bylaws, the quorum is reduced to 800 with a proxy limitation of 10. The committee reasoned that this proxy limitation would reduce the impact on members in obtaining proxies and would ensure a full and fair representation of the membership. Slide 10, please. Members also sought clarification on recommendations to the board. The revised bylaws clarification is that member recommendation presented to the board would receive full consideration and would be passed, denied, or not be acted upon. In the instance where a recommendation is not acted upon, there's an established time frame now, and after 45 days, a recommendation not acted upon would be considered denied. This would trigger a time frame for action by membership with regard to any recommendation that is denied. Under the new procedures, a form will be available and a control number will be issued by RCSC management. The key component here is that this new procedure does not involve the RCSC board. Slide 11, please. Under the proposed revised bylaw, petitioners will be able to obtain signatures on RCSC property so long as members gathering signatures do not interfere with members' use of or access to the facilities. Petitioners may not block any ingress or egress to the facility. And the number of required signatures remains at 10%. Slide 12. The proposed revised bylaws contain a new recall procedure that is similar to the earlier mentioned petitions. There are established timeframes and deadlines that will be noted by RCSC management on the recall form. The member must have a basis for recall. Slide 13. Any recall petition based on unlawful discrimination will not be accepted and will be returned to the petitioner without action. This category includes, but is not limited to, race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, age, physical or mental disability, or veteran status. Last slide. The proposed revised bylaws clearly reflect a committed effort by the Bylaws Committee to meet the needs, expectations, and recommendations of both the members and the RCSC board. The committee believes that it has created a strong and fair system upon which the corporation can operate. I thank the committee members for undertaking and completing this gargantuan task. The Bylaws Committee will be finalizing the documents, and they will be brought before the RCSC board for approval. Thank you. Mr. Levesky?
Thank you, Director Fimmel. Starting with Patrick Gannon, this is the board's opportunity to give it, I mean, not the board, the committee's opportunity to give its statements. Again, they are available to answer any questions that the board may ask, as am I and Director Fimmel. Mr. Gannon?
Is this mic on?
Yeah.
First, I want to thank the other 6 regularly participating members of the committee for the work they put into the revised bylaws that the board is reviewing. I also want to thank our parliamentarian, Ray Charnenke, for her invaluable insights and advice when we were wrestling with many difficult issues. And finally, I want to thank Marcia Johnson, Corporate Executive Coordinator, who continuously updated the document for all the changes that the committee members hammered out in our discussions. This was one of the most complex volunteer projects in governance that I've ever worked on. I logged 119 hours of weekly meetings and review of documents between meetings in the 5 months that we worked intensively on revising the bylaws. I came to this work with the core belief that healthy shared self-governance provides for processes for both the membership and for the elected board of directors to share in the governance of RCSC. And I want to offer a reminder to myself and to all of us, members, board of directors, that the current bylaws RCSC has been operating under, they do not, in my view, provide for shared self-governance. As a member owner, I volunteered for the ad hoc committee because I believe it's critical that the members have a right to petition without having to ask for the board's approval if they disagree with a board decision. Every step along the way in our committee deliberations, I negotiated for the members' right to petition and other motions that were made on the December 13th annual meeting. I know there'll be some members and likely some RCSC board members who will disagree with various parts of the revised bylaws. As committee members, we went back over various components of some of the bylaws a number of times because we disagreed with proposed changes made by fellow committee members. We all compromised along the way. So I ask that you look at the whole of the document in the context of shared self-governance. I further ask that as you review the new bylaws document, that you keep uppermost in your mind that these bylaws are a living document. If some parts of these bylaws are not exactly what you wanted them to be, then I urge you to volunteer to work to refine them in the future. But now's the time to vote to put these revised bylaws in place and to operate within them. I urge you to embrace what became in the course of our work our committee's operating practice, that compromise is the art of the possible. I urge you to pass these bylaws so we, the members, and you, the board members, can move forward as better partners in self-governance. Thank you.
Mine's going to be shorter. My name is Carmel Sharon Brock, and it's been an honor and a privilege to work on this committee. And another special thank you to Ray and Marcia for all their extra time with us. Like they said, there were several debates throughout this process, and all members spoke their views. But we got through them with compromise and consensus, thus the final draft before you now. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I was honored also to be on this committee. Again, I would like to thank my fellow members. My first impression was nobody died in the process, which gives an indication of some of the disagreements we might have had. And definitely a shout out to the parliamentarian and to Marcia Johnson, who really is the power behind the throne, whether she knows it or not. There were two areas that I had personal views on. One was proxies, because I hate proxies. The reason being, if someone will sign a proxy, why won't they show up? But proxies were in the Articles of Incorporation, and if nothing else, I do follow the law. The other one was mandatory attendance to the candidate orientation session. The reason for my wanting that is it comes down to commitment. I served on the board for 5 years. It's a strong commitment. Being on this committee is a strong commitment. I sit on the insurance committee, which is a commitment. I sit on budget, audit, and finance, which is a commitment. If a candidate wants to be on the board, they have to show that they are committed to it. Now, we argued this point, believe it or not, for a long time, and various scenarios came up, one of which was, what if there's a death in the family? And this was about 4 hours into the argument, and my first reaction was, they're dead, they're not going anywhere. But that's the cynical point. I don't believe that'll come up very often, but I still stand by, I believe it should be mandatory. I do urge, this was a tough job. There were a lot of disagreements, a lot of hours spent. I didn't punch a time clock like Pat did, but he's absolutely correct. Between the meetings, sitting at home reviewing what we did, writing suggestions down, and in my case, I kept a pencil and pad by my bed, so when I woke up at 3 in the morning with an idea, I could write it down. That we worked very hard on this. Not everybody is happy, but this is the document we are presenting. Chairman Lipneski gave us a good example recently concerning the bylaws, that it's like the Constitution. The original Constitution of the United States wasn't perfect. The people who did it knew it wasn't perfect, but they made a provision for amendments to change it. We know things are going to change based on demographics, just our evolving society. So where we stand now, I strongly urge that the Board of Directors approve this. Thank you very much. Stella, you're up.
Thank you. My name is Stella Van Ness, and again, I'd like to thank the other committee members, Marcia Johnson, Jim Heighton, Ray, and don't ask me to pronounce your last name, it ain't going to happen, okay? Our committee chair, Alan, yeah, I can't say it right now, Lineski, and our co-chair, Kat Famel. You all contributed tremendously to this process, and we really appreciate everything you did, as well as the other committee members. I really appreciate all of them and their willingness to compromise and work on this project. While everyone may not have gotten everything they wanted, nothing is ever perfect. We cannot please all of the people all the time. I cannot stress the importance, again, of passing the recommended board policies before the bylaw changes are made. Because if you don't, you are going to have significant gaps in your governing policy, in your governing documents. So an example of that is incident reports. Incident reports were removed from the bylaws and put it in, recommended to a board policy. If you do not have those board policies passed, you will not have anything covering incident reports and what goes on within this community. Going into the committee back in March, we had what appeared to be two opposing forces. Today, after long hours of discussion, both within the committee meeting and outside of the boardroom, we have put together a compromised document. We have already heard people who have been publicly questioning and disparaging the integrity of this ad hoc committee. I cannot begin to express to you the level of commitment, devotion, compassion, and dedication to the needs and wants of the members as well as the corporation that have been poured into this document. I strongly recommend that you approve this document as written. I want to thank you again, everyone involved, for their time on this issue and their dedication to this process. Thank you.
And Janet Curry's available by phone, so she can speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, my name is Janet Curry, and like the others, I feel it has been a privilege to serve on the ad hoc committee to review these bylaws. I had made plans to join you in person today, but a fall and a couple broken bones has kept me in Nebraska. When I applied and interviewed to be on the committee, I knew it would be challenging, time-consuming, tedious, and hopefully eventually rewarding. It has been all of those things. One of my main focuses has been to ensure accountability throughout the bylaws. I look at accountability as threefold: between members, board of directors, and management. There is plenty written into the current bylaws to keep members accountable. We have to pay our fees and assessments, show our membership cards at RCSC facilities and events, plus assuring that we and our guests maintain proper conduct when using the facilities. There is a disciplinary process if we do not do so. It has been less clear about how to have accountability of the board of directors. First and foremost, the annual election of directors is the primary way that members can express their preferences. The language in the annual and special membership meetings, as well as the recall petition process, has not worked quite as well recently. As a committee, we spent much time discussing these topics. What you see in this draft is a compromise on all committee members' parts because we were quite far apart on how to resolve these issues. We also added due process for a director when the board has determined their potential removal. Is all this perfect? Probably not. The board of directors is charged with keeping management accountable through the general manager. Most of the process for doing this is recommended to be moved back to board policy. If the membership is not pleased with the way management has handled something, they may express themselves at the monthly membership board meetings, excuse me. I have been a stalwart advocate of doing all of RCSC business in open sessions, with the few exceptions spelled out in these bylaws under executive sessions. In my opinion, the only way members can hold the board of directors and thus management accountable is if members have all of the necessary information. I was persistent on this issue, more likely unrelenting. I am sure some of my fellow committee members would say I was exceedingly bothersome about it. I think we made some progress in this area by including informational meetings in the bylaws. These are meetings where the board meets with the general manager and others as needed to discuss the issues brought up at the member board exchange. Members are not allowed to attend these informational meetings, although I would prefer it otherwise. Anytime a quorum of the board is getting together and discussing RCSC business, it should be considered a meeting and members should know about it. Some call this transparency. I refer to it as full disclosure. When people do not see the whole picture, assumptions are made, misinformation is spread, and trust is lost. After about 6 weeks of meeting, we were joined by our parliamentarian and corporate secretary. As the others has mentioned, they were both extremely helpful to get to this point and deserve our thanks. Also, Carmel was our note taker, and she spent endless hours taking notes and getting them out to us. And I'm sure it also prevented her from participating quite as much in the conversations. I can think of 3 issues that all of the committee members agreed on. They were due process for removal of directors, recall petitions not needing board approval, and a process for members to promote the motions made at the membership meeting. This draft provides for a petition process if the motions are rejected or no response is given within 45 days. It is still a protracted process for members to vote on their own motions, but this again was a compromise. We also changed the voting process to a standing vote, which should be a simpler process. I think the most important compromise was getting to the 800-member quorum with limiting each person to proxies. I support this change to the bylaws. One of the things I would like to see added back into the bylaws is that members have access to corporate records. I think it's been moved out completely to a board policy. I am promoting that you look at alternative B in terms of candidates for the board not having to attend the session if there is an extreme situation. And I'll mention that I do think today the president has not been able to attend because of illness. And I don't think that should prevent her from being able to continue as a board. I think it should be the same for a potential candidate. To the board of directors, please approve what you and future boards can live with. Bylaws are meant to be specific and consistently applied. No one should be making up or changing the rules as we go. In summary, we are presenting this draft to the board for your consideration and to the members for their opinions. All are important. There have already been many concerns raised that our committee will likely have to discuss, decide how to respond, and where to go from here. In my interview at the beginning of this process, I said I would make the time for this to work, and I will. I also admitted that I was familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, but not an expert. This has been a learning process for me. Thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Okay, I think at this point, we'll open it up to questions from the board. Okay, Steve.
I have one question. The members brought up 5 motions at the last meeting.
That's correct.
We're not going to have this in place by the meeting. So
That's also correct.
If we didn't approve what they asked for, then we're giving them a denial. And we have to do this at the next meeting according to the corporate bylaws from last year. So does that mean at this members' meeting, if we disagreed with them, then they can do a petition to get these things enacted?
At this point, number one, the committee dealt with the bylaws in the future. One of the things that occurred last year, or should I say this year, that the committee, I believe, was firmly dedicated to making sure never happens again, is where thing is passed at a annual meeting and nothing happens. I know I personally wanted to put in the provision after 45 days it's deemed denied. It's done in a lot of legal cases and things like that, so that this situation would never occur. Because the bylaws are not going to be likely to be passed before the annual meeting, that flaw will still exist. And that's going to have to be handled outside of this committee. My own personal view is that they died without being able to be acted on. You know, at any time, the people on this board could have chosen to put in all 5 of them and forced a vote. I would have voted no on them at that time because I didn't agree with some of the things, but that would have triggered it. But because no one brought up 3 of the votes, or forced 3 of the votes, that flaw exists. These bylaws will make sure that never happens again.
But if we all voted no, then they have a right at that meeting, and we're going to tell them we denied them, and then they can bring forth a petition.
Right, but no one, I didn't vote on 3 of them. I voted against 2 of them. I would have voted against the other 3, but because that vote has never taken place, it did not trigger any further action. This bylaw, which I think is one of the most important changes in the bylaw, will make sure that doesn't happen again.
I'm not questioning whether it's in here. My question is, at this meeting, they're going to say, we didn't get this. So now are you giving us a denial? Do we have the right to petition? That's my question.
That denial does not exist under the current bylaws.
Correct.
I personally felt, I'm not going to say anything else, I personally thought that flaw had to be fixed. And it is, but under the current bylaws that will be in existence at the annual meeting, that flaw, in my view, still exists. So they don't have the right. That's my view. But you can seek a legal opinion on that. We're trying to make sure that never happens again, so that dispute never deals again.
I understand they're corrected that.
Right.
My question is, are we legal in saying you guys made this, we denied you, and now we're just going to close it? That's my question.
You know, yes.
I think Director Collins is asking about the 45-day limit. And the fact that, is that right? The 45-day limit, the fact that subjects were brought up at the last annual meeting. No action will be taken officially before the next annual meeting. So will that 45-day type no action taken, which is interpreted as a denial, is that going to happen? And I think you just said no, because that 45-day, is that right, limit?
It was a year. We had to respond within a year in the old articles.
My view is...
That's the issue.
Okay. My view is, no, the board hasn't acted on it. It's triggered nothing. So the vote most likely cannot take place. But I'm not acting as the attorney for the corporation, and so I'm not giving legal advice. That's a question that you may want the board to ask the attorney before the annual meeting.
Where was it? Where is it in the current bylaws?
It's in the articles that we had to act on it before the next meeting, one way or another.
Not in the bylaws, but in the articles of incorporation.
So that's my question. Since we didn't act on it, is that going to, we're going to walk in and say, this is a no, you guys do what you got to do?
I think that's a legal question that needs to be sent to the corporate attorney.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And I would say that need was obviated by the creation of the revised bylaw documents, which in fact addressed all of the issues that had been contained in the recommendations that were made at that meeting. So once approval is granted, or at the time approval is granted, that becomes a moot point, because all of those issues were addressed in the revised bylaws. There's nothing left to address. They've actually been addressed. And once the board approves the new bylaws, everything that the membership requested will have occurred.
I agree with that.
Good.
But we're going to be past the time.
That's is basically not relevant. It will only become relevant in the event that these revised bylaws do not get approved. Because once these bylaws are approved, the issues have been resolved.
May I ask, what article are you talking about, Director Collins?
I don't have my book with me. There's one in there that said at the items brought up at the members' meeting, we had to make a decision on them by the next members' meeting.
And
that's my question.
in essence, that has occurred because they're all addressed. So action has been taken with regard to all of those recommendations. It won't be completed until such time as the new bylaws are approved, but action has been taken and is being addressed.
That's fine. If we're going to check, if we have to check into it, as long as we check into it before the meeting.
John.
My question is more of procedural of what happens moving forward. We are going to get some revised or updated board policies. We will be looking at those, and those are going to come before us in some time frame. We have received internally an email with those policies. Will those be made public on the policies so that the members can take a look at them? What's going to be our procedure? Are we looking at passing the bylaws, the board policies in October, November, and then the actual bylaws November, December? What is our anticipated time frame?
Okay. Well, being a member of the board of directors and not being the president making some of those calls of the board of directors, the committees made a report. What the policies did is we took the policies out and we did not change a word of them, is my understanding. What I envision, but not speaking now for the committee, what I envision is a vote to adopt those policies as they exist in the board of in the bylaws, so that they're in place as a placeholder. That can be done at the same meeting as the bylaws, but the vote for the policies has to be before the bylaws. So we're working on that, trying to figure out exactly how to do that. So that's the way I envision it. The policies go into effect, the bylaws are passed, right? In 1 or 2 votes, depending on if you waive it, it'll say it's 2. The vote for the policies takes place first, and then we go forward. And then if people want to change the policies next year, you can make amendments, or you can have another committee to do it. But if we had dealt with both the policies and the bylaws, what the people who were in dissent last year wanted us to act quickly, we'd be here for another 2 years. So we made a choice to basically deal with the bylaws we wanted and have the policies dealt with separately.
Director Nowakowski, basically to answer your question, 3 things are going to happen, hopefully in this order. First, the board will have to vote on the present policies that were created when policies were pulled out of the bylaws and put back into policy. We know that document needs some work, but it's going to have to be approved as is, because we cannot proceed without policies in place. The time frame for reviewing and revising any policies will be sometime in the future. But when next we meet to talk about the bylaws, first we have to approve the policies. Then there is in all likelihood going to need to be a vote on what we refer to as alternate A and B. Alternate A is you have to attend an orientation. Alternate B is that a video could be made available. Once those 2 things are done, then the revised bylaws will be complete, and we will be able to vote on the revised bylaws as a package in whatever fashion the vote takes place. So those 3 things will need to happen.
Good. Somebody from the committee want to address it? So go ahead.
Am I on? Am I on? Okay. Yeah, I just want to clarify something which some people, either both on the board and in the membership, may not be aware of. But back in 2018, 2019, we had a number of board policies. I believe there were 33 board policies. Those board policies were pushed into the bylaws. They were just made a part of the bylaws. Okay, the committee looked at those bylaws and said, this is not realistic. These are policies. They do not belong in the bylaws. So we recommended that those policies, the same ones that were just pushed into the bylaws, be pulled back out of the bylaws and made back into the same board policies that were originally shoved into the bylaws. Now, they're in the same verbiage and everything that they were in when they were pushed into the bylaws to begin with. So we're just asking or recommending that you just accept those board policies back as they were stated previously in 2018, before they got put into the bylaws, so that we can go ahead and move on with the new revised recommended bylaws. And that's it. It's an old process that was done. They got pushed in, and we're just asking that they be pulled out because they don't belong there.
Director McAdam.
So I have two questions. Actually, I have a lot more than two questions, but I have two broad questions that I'd like to ask first. And I'll just ask them first before you respond, so you can think about how you want to respond to that. So first of all, I'm quite sure that you had a discussion very early on as a committee about what the purpose of bylaws is. And I would just be curious to know what was the conclusion that you came to about what is the function and the purpose of bylaws as opposed to articles or policies or administrative rules. That would be my first question. And my second question is that, Patrick, you used the term shared self-governance. And I'm curious about that. I would like to know, normally we talk about this being a self-governing community, and I'd like to know a little bit more about whether that concept is something that is just peculiar to you, or whether that's a consensus position of this committee about what exactly is meant by shared self-governance.
Does someone besides me want to answer the first question? Yeah, Dave.
Director McAdam, bylaws, okay, articles of incorporation I looked at is what is known in law as an enabling document. It lays out generally what we want. The bylaws are the procedures that we follow according to, as devised by the articles of incorporation. In other words, it says members haven't vote at the annual meeting. Okay, what is the procedure for voting? The articles don't describe it, but we have to set out a procedure for voting. So we put it in the bylaws. Do you understand that?
I do. I actually have pretty highly developed ideas of my own about what the comparative function is of these, but I'm just curious about because apparently this was the basis, for instance, obviously, of making the decision to pull out things that we think are policies and aren't necessarily bylaws. So I'm just curious about what the broader philosophy is of why bylaws exist.
Anybody else want to comment on that before Patrick Gannon gets a chance to respond to a specific question?
I would just say that was not a charge to the committee. The committee's charge was to review and revise the bylaws. Broader concepts, as you declare them, was not an issue for the bylaws committee. We were charged with reviewing and revising the bylaws, and that's what the committee did.
I would like to just add that I think we all were in agreement that we would like to get the bylaws in a place where they're functional and that they don't so that they would not need to be amended all that often, all that frequently. Right now, I think we see amendments to bylaws quite frequently in some of the board agendas, and we'd like to have them set so that that wouldn't happen quite so often, if anybody's in agreement with me.
Yes, Janet. Patrick, you want to answer your session?
Director McAdam, I'd like to address your second question. And I can only speak for myself that I believe the term shared self-governance was my term. It was spoken in the committee meetings over and over by myself in order to try to make it a part of our lexicon. What I mean, how I define shared self-governance, and I guess there's just a little bit of background to kind of get me to that point, if you would indulge me for a moment. When I first came here, I asked to see the audited financial statements. I'm a certified public accountant, or was for a number of years. And that document tells me a lot in the notes and things. And I was told I had to fill out a form to request the board approve me looking at the audited financial statements of the corporation that I was now a member owner of. And I thought that was odd, and I was taken aback, actually. So I filled out the form, and it must have been, it was approved by the board because I got a call back from staff. Staff did their job and said, you can come in, but you have to sit in a room with a staff person. You cannot be alone with the documents. And I thought that was odd. So when I looked at the bylaws and read the bylaws, every avenue open to the members ultimately ended up with not having the authority, the members not having the authority to do petitions without the board's approval. That would be one of them. There were other things that, as far as I could tell, every avenue of process for members that seemed to be available to members ended up with, you got to get the board's approval. And so I started developing in my own mind this concept that it's not shared self-governance if the members have no avenues to do anything without the permission of the board. And I strongly believe in checks and balances, and that there are certain things that the board needs to attend to, but there are certain things that members have every right to insist upon because there's, I don't know, 32,180 members, and there's 9 board members. And it just seemed like the reality is there was no power sharing. The power was all up in the board of directors and not the members. And so that's kind of what I developed in my own mind, and saying this would be so much better because if we petition, we members petition the board for something, and we don't have to ask you if we can petition. Petition is like, to me, at least in my understanding of history, is like the foundation piece of what members have as their vehicle. You know, the Declaration of Independence, I think we petitioned George III that, you know, you're taxing us and we're not getting representation. So that's not okay. And so petition is a right of the members. And it's a good power sharing, because if we petition and are successful in gaining the signatures, that's a huge statement to this board that this issue, whatever it is a big deal. And so I'm not Pollyannish. I know the power is all up on the stage right now under the current bylaws. And what these bylaws do is address and give the members the opportunity to move forward without the board's permission. And I think that's healthy, and I think that would serve all of us better. And I say, you know, try it out. Run with these for a year. I mean, it's hard to get 3,218 signatures on a petition. It's common sense that we have to be able to gather those signatures in the places where members congregate, which are the recreation centers and the softball field, I'm sure. But whatever those places are. So I'm rambling a little bit. I apologize for that. But that's where I came up with this concept of shared self-governance, because we've got a unique situation here. It can be a really strong partnership between all of the members and the board, I think. And that's how I came up with it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody? Anybody on the committee have anything else to say? Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
So I guess my question would be sort of one as far as process is concerned. So you've made a presentation to us, and we as board members were asked in the space of less than 48 hours to respond to what we saw for the very first time as the document that you had put together. And a number of us have responded. There have been other non-board member inputs into this. And I guess my question is, where do we have the discussion about the things? For instance, I wrote an 8-page document in response to this that you all have access to. I don't feel like I want to go through each of those things right now here, but what's the process that's out there for having those discussions?
This is it. What happened is we have a number of things, and we discussed all of them in the committee. Some of them, like grammar errors, I don't think need to be brought up again, because everybody agrees that if there's a grammar error, that needs to be fixed. But this is an opportunity, as I see it, the board, you know, this is being broadcast too. The board, if those questions still exist and you want to ask those questions, this is it. In other words, we were asked to do that. You were asked to do that so we could prepare for any questions you have here, so go for it.
We received comments. The chair and I have reviewed the comments. We have, as Director Lanevsky says, made some initial edits to the document. And the committee will meet again between now and the committee's meeting again to refine anything that needs to be refined based on the comments that the directors provided. I think that's the answer to your question. The committee will meet again.
Ms. Director McAdam, if you have questions and you want to raise those concerns, everybody's here, including Janet Curry by phone. Go for it.
Okay. How much time do we have?
Just go for it. And if it takes too long, people will most likely be very clear about that.
Okay.
But go for it.
Well, I have my document in front of me here, and maybe, I guess the question is whether I should just walk through it sequentially or whether I should do it in terms of what I consider to be the most important articles.
Just a second.
Maybe.
Director Collins.
Excuse me, but Kat just said that they're going to meet with the committee again. Wouldn't it be better to wait until they meet with the committee, answer the questions, and then we ask questions?
Here's what I envision.
I mean, you will at that time get the final, prior to being asked to vote on anything, you will get the committee's final document.
What I would like to see is if somebody has some serious concerns because we're going to meet again, I'd like to know what those concerns are so that we can respond to them.
They got written to you.
Yeah, but that's in writing. Karen, do you have any real major concern that you want to discuss right now?
Well, I have 8 pages of concerns, but I can try to choose the
Why don't you
ones that I think
summarize
are the
them?
most important ones.
Yeah, why don't you summarize them in a statement? Just say what you're thinking.
Okay. I mean, the board has seen these all. The committee has seen them already, so I guess this is for people who don't have access to the document that I put together. I guess I would just offer anybody that's interested in seeing what my response was. It was kind of rushed. We had less than 48 hours to respond to this. Please just contact me, and I'd be happy to send you the whole document. So I am very concerned about the idea that a power imbalance has been adequately addressed. So I think, Patrick, I heard you say that you felt that the board had all the power and that you were trying to make sure that there was a voice for the membership. So of the 5 motions that were put forward after the membership met a quorum, easily exceeded a quorum, but for the first time in 12 years last year, it was very clear, although they were denied an opportunity to vote, that a voice vote was nonetheless taken, and it was clear that there was a very high consensus level there on these 5 motions. And as far as I can see, one of them has been cleanly passed. So that's 20%. Which means that 80% of them were not cleanly passed. So they were dealt with, they were addressed, but not in a way that the members had submitted them. So for instance, the quorum requirement, they had asked for the quorum requirement to be dropped to 500, and you dropped it to 800. I can understand that, but then you added this caveat that no member could bring forward more than 10 proxy votes, where you knew that last year there were a half a dozen people who each brought in over 100 proxy votes. And I guess I'm just asking myself, what kind of a look is that? Is that really a look that makes it seem like we're trying to encourage membership participation and giving voice to membership? I understand that you can be concerned that a few people could have an undue influence there, but I think you can't cut out membership altogether or tell them you're only allowed to bring 10 votes. I mean, in order to get the 800 proxy votes or something like that we had last year, instead of having 10 people collecting votes, you would have to have 80 people collecting proxy votes. I'm concerned that that's kind of a slap in the face of active membership who has followed the rules and tried to do trying to motivate the community to become involved. So that would be one of my concerns. Another concern that I would have is that the motion that was brought forward, well, I guess, we're always going to come back to the Article 8, I think it is, of the Articles of Incorporation, which say that the bylaws may be amended, modified, revised, or revoked. But in the event of a conflict between the bylaws as amended or revoked by the directors, the action of the members shall prevail. So I ask myself, okay, the membership prevailed in 20% of what happened. So you've undoubtedly had this conversation. It looks to me like in 80% of the cases the membership did not prevail. And I know what the argument is. The argument is, yeah, you've got the articles, but it's fleshed out by bylaws. But you're not allowed to have bylaws that contradict the intent of the Articles of Incorporation. And you had the opportunity here to actually make sure that the bylaws did not contradict that, and that the bylaws clearly give the membership, when they meet the quorum requirements, they go through the voting process, they go whatever they go through, and they shall prevail is the wording that's there. We're not allowed to have bylaws that deny that from happening, and I'm afraid that that's, when I look at this, that's what I see. The members asked you to get rid of that, the statement that the board will just take those motions that are approved at a meeting that has been properly constituted under consideration for study. And I ask myself, so what's the big deal about an annual membership meeting? If all that I really need to do in order to get something taken under consideration or studied by the board is to show up at a monthly member board exchange. Anytime that anybody brings something up here, it goes onto an Excel chart and it gets studied and dealt with by the board. What's the difference? It seems to me that when you have an annual membership meeting that is officially recognized, that meets the quorum requirement and all those things, you ought to be in a different position than when you just show up to a member board exchange and accomplish the same result. I'm very concerned about that. Maybe I'll stop there. I've got a lot more where that came from, but those would be some of my larger concerns.
Before I answer that, because I have some comments, does anyone else on the committee want to make a comment?
I will. This is Janet. This is one part where we had to compromise, and I'm sure Alan will explain his position here in a few minutes. I can understand where you're coming from, Director McAdam, in terms of the language. To me, the language is very clear in the articles. Here again, we tried to make a process that allowed things to not just stay in limbo. I think in my remarks, I said it's still a protracted process for members because they have to get a quorum, and then they have to get a petition, and then we have a meeting, or there's a vote, and so it's still somewhat cumbersome. I think a lot of this needs to yet be flushed out, and so I'm turning that back over to you, Director Lineski.
Thank you, Janet. Anyone else have a comment? I do then. Director McAdam, I understand what you said, and you're talking about the board not voting on this stuff. As I said before, I was opposed to them in their current position. I was more than willing to vote against them, and it would have been a no vote, and it would have triggered any rights for petitions. Members of the board who were for those things could have introduced them and voted and forced a vote. That didn't happen. So we are protecting the members in this one by putting a 45-day. Secondly, the argument that we've only gone 20%, you and I may disagree. The facts are what they are. They're in there. I disagree. We acted on recalls. We acted on petitions. We acted on the quorum. So the question here is if people are standing and wanting to get 100% of what they want on all of those, it's not going to happen. I didn't get 100% of what I wanted. No member of the committee, to my knowledge, got 100% of what they wanted. This is a compromise document. So the people of the board, if they want to make some reforms, have to make a decision. Did we move it in the right direction, or are we moving in the wrong direction? I believe we're moving in the right direction. I believe we've empowered the membership more than it was. I believe that every one of the members of that committee is comfortable with what has occurred. There is also an amendment procedure. So as this board votes, it's got to decide whether it wants to reject the whole thing or it doesn't. This is a compromise document. If you start playing with certain parts of it, it could very well end with other parts of it that were compromised falling apart. So it's, as a whole, are we moving forward? I believe we are. If the committee, I think the committee believes we are. If they disagree with me at this point, tell us. And so again, I urge a vote, but we acted and we considered every one of them. Yes, Mr. Collins.
Go ahead.
Collins. I'm done.
I don't see how we could do our fiduciary duty when we were given 2 days to get the questions. They're sent in, and now it's going to go back to the committee for them to answer some of the questions. I think if we don't have all of the information, the bylaws, the policies, everything at our disposal, we might even be breaking state law. I think we need to have everything to make an informed, proper decision and fulfill our fiduciary duty.
To my knowledge, you have everything, including the policies. I believe those went out. If I'm mistaken, I'm not the one who physically did it. I'm not the one who orders whether it's done. But my understanding is what is out there is our bylaws, in one form, in two forms now. One form is just read them and that's what it would be. The other form is the changes with strikeouts and things. My understanding of the policies are also out. So to my knowledge, the board has everything at this point.
You said it's going back to the committee, and they're going to answer the questions. Well,
No, we did not say it was going back to the committee to answer questions. The committee will meet one more time to finalize this document before presenting it to the board. What you looked at was a proposed document. I think we're getting a little wound around here. You know, we've just listened not to some questions about the bylaw document, but to some philosophical views about how things might have been done or should have been done or could be done, none of which we were charged with. This committee was charged with reviewing the bylaws. They reviewed the bylaws. And in reviewing the bylaws, and it's worth repeating again, we addressed all of the recommendations and issues that had been made by the membership. And in fact, when you review these bylaws, you will see that all of those recommendations have actually been addressed. Having been addressed, once this document is approved, then what the membership requested the last go-around will actually have been accomplished. So I don't think people should, there's no fiduciary issue here in terms of rewriting bylaws. You know, the bylaws were rewritten for the purpose of, number one, they needed to be rewritten, and number two, there were recommendations made by the membership. So the only thing that needs to be addressed here today is the rewriting of the bylaws.
Vice President Hackey?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're not making any decisions today. We're not voting on anything today. We are, so you still do have time to review the document. So, I mean, we got the document last week, and you had time to look it over, come up with some questions. You gave them to the committee. They'll come back, and you may have some more questions after that. We still have time for more discussion. We're not making any decisions today, and we're not voting on anything today. So it's not like we're going to be violating anything, because we're not voting on anything.
Yeah.
So just a question. I'm gathering from what I'm hearing there that the intention is to allow the membership to speak to this at the October 10th member board exchange, and then to bring it forward on October 27th, I think, is the next meeting of the board for an up or down vote on the totality of the revision. Is that correct?
Yeah, mostly. I think that, you know, there's some preliminary thoughts about when this can be. And again, Director McAdam, as far as timing and stuff, your say is as much as I'm. Right now, we're making a committee report, but both you and I are directors with basically equal power. I think we're going to be addressing it on October 12th or whatever the exchange is. I expect that one of us, and this is no guarantee, will make a motion at some point in October, most likely at the October meeting, to pass a specific document that'll occur. Well, then what happen is we're going to have develop procedures, right, that will allow how the votes or amendments take place. But yes, I think basically your understanding of what's going to occur is correct, but I can't guarantee that.
Okay. So I do have a few further
Go ahead.
specific questions, since this is apparently the forum for talking about that. So I happen to have a pretty strong personal interest in the due process for the dismissal of board members by fellow board members. So I'm looking at right now on page 19, so it's under, what article is that? That is, section 3, so it's Article 6, officers, section 5, so disciplinary and removal proceedings for board of directors, letter D.
Hold on. Which page again?
Page 19.
And this is the 24-page document?
That's correct, 19 of 24. So letter D.
Give me a minute.
You said section 5?
That's correct.
Okay? What's your question?
So this is my question. I'm very pleased to see that you actually did go ahead and, as was requested, the request had actually been from the membership that the Articles of Incorporation include a due process statement for members of the board prior to their dismissal or prior to an attempt to dismiss them. But I'm just looking under letter D. So there are 4 things that are mentioned here. Removal or discipline for cause includes but is not limited to the following grounds. So number 1, I have no problem with failure to maintain the required residence status, which qualifies an individual to hold elective office. That's pretty clear. Number 2 says you could be removed or disciplined for cause if you publicly advocate against or take action against the distributed objectives of the RCSC. Can somebody explain to me what is meant by the distributed objectives of RCSC?
Yes. That was extensively discussed. And what it is it's not things like Mountain View, it's not things like pickleball. We're here as a recreational thing. So let's say somebody decided that we didn't want to be a recreational thing. We wanted to become a political party, for instance, or we wanted to become a cause for something else. So you would be going against the entire purpose of why RCSC exists. That's what it's about. That was extensively discussed. Anybody from the committee have any other memory of what was said or have any comment?
Well, director should not act contrary to the best interest of the board, the members, or management. We need to act in the best interest of the entire organization.
Okay, I understand that. On the other hand, I mean, I think this just leaves open a lot of room for sort of nasty behavior, and I would prefer to see this cleaned up a little bit. Okay. So the distributive objectives of the RCSC, I mean, we have very clearly in Article 3 of the Articles of Incorporation what the purpose is of this organization. The general nature of business in which the corporation is engaged is as follows. And I don't have to read it for you, but it's basically saying who we are. We have that also in the revised bylaws. You say right at the very beginning that, let's see, the object under Article 1, the corporation, Section 2, the object of the RCSC shall be to support recreational facilities of Sun City. So we've got it there, we've got it in the articles, we've got it in the bylaws, and we have it in our mission statement. So the mission of RCSC is to provide the broadest range of recreational and social facilities possible to enhance the active lifestyle and well-being of Sun City residents. So I'm all in favor of saying that a board member has to agree to that, but saying that they have to be, that they, that advocating against the distributed objectives of the RCSC to me leaves too much room for interpretation, and I would really like to see that changed to shall not publicly advocate against the mission statement or bylaws Article 3 that describes the founding nature of the corporation, or the just because it sounds like you could use this to say, well, we have published an article in The Independent. The president of the board has said that this is what we're planning to do, and if anybody advocated against it or took action against it, that could be grounds for dismissal. So that would be a concern that I have. But it goes on, yes, because 3 and 4 are actually, so I actually think that number 3 handles that. You said violation or actions which are in conflict with the bylaw provisions, standing rules, or adopted policies of the RCSC. That's fine, although you have to leave open the possibility that a board member could actually say, I'm putting a motion forward to change this bylaw or to change this policy. I mean, you're making it sound like you can't disagree with anything. And the real problem for me here is in number 4, that another cause for removal or discipline for cause would be dilatory actions causing needless expenditure of time or resources, or tending to cause delay, to cause confusion, to obstruct, or to enhance the individual or his or her position. I'm sorry, to me, this is something that's saying you're not allowed to debate. You're not allowed to say, I disagree with this. You're not allowed to say, I think we need to go back to the well and we need to get more data on this, because that could be viewed as obstruction or as a delay. To me, this is the heart of being a board member, is being willing to engage in robust debate, because that's what causes the best decisions to be made. And it seems to me like this is being viewed as a cause for removal.
I'd like to respond to that, and then I'll let any committee member who wants to respond to it. Deleterious actions causing needless expenditures of time and resources, tending to cause delay, confusion, and all of that stuff. That's not about debate. It's about a member of the board who's failing to do their fiduciary duty and causing extreme stress and causing harm to the corporation. I am for robust debate. This whole document makes robust debate far more possible than it is now. But we have a fiduciary duty, and this basically, number 4, says if you do this stuff, you're violating your fiduciary duty, and that's grounds for removal. Now, maybe the wording can be a little bit better. I don't know, but the bottom line is all 9 of us up here, and whoever gets elected to the board, number 1 thing is to follow the fiduciary duty and protect this corporation. And this thing, in my view, is absolutely essential. But again, we have a disagreement on that.
Could you give me some examples of what that kind of dilatory action might be?
May I respond? Because we've moved away from the document and we're moving back again into philosophical perspectives. It's my perception that you are taking the narrowest view of this document, and that you, once again, I'm going to comment that you are trying to supplant your view of what should have been put in here over that of the committee members who wrote this document. This is, your comments are not aimed at the document. They are aimed at, I get the beginning to get the feeling they are somewhat personal. And so we need to reflect our comments about the document. This committee was put together to revise the bylaws. They have revised the bylaws. If you have an objection, I mean, you're in an area now where we've moved too far away from the rewriting of the bylaws. We were almost engaging in a debate here about why we should have revised the bylaws, your view of what the bylaws should be. These weren't rewritten by one person. They were rewritten by a committee, and they are the reflected view of the committee members. And I'm going to
I would like to respond to this. Although this document was written by a committee, we were not all in agreement about including the language in this part of it. I don't remember exactly. We had some votes that I was in the minority, others were too, and I believe this was one of them, because I concur that they're too open to interpretation. But you know, the majority rules, and that's why they are included. And so I think that Director McAdams' question and concerns are worthy of us discussing as a committee when we meet again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a comment for the committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Under that same item, it says removal or discipline for cause includes, but is not limited to. And my question to that is, if it's not limited to, who makes the decision of what else can be added?
Anybody want to respond to that?
I asked the same question, John, or Director Nowalski, and Director Lenevsky, would you please give him the answer you gave me, which had to do with this is very common in legal documents.
What happens a lot of times is you have a list, and I'll call it a laundry list, but you leave room open for in case you miss something. For instance, let's say somebody shows up with a gun, and it's not in the list, and they would go, well, it's not in the list, right? But not limited to means that you can do that kind of stuff. And the people who would actually be making the decision is the board who's voting on the removal. There's no way to list everything that a board member could possibly do that would be cause for removal. I mean, you could list if they steal money, right? You could list if they commit a felony. You could list all sorts of things, but there is undoubtedly something that we haven't thought about. And that's why that's in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Stella.
Yes, I'd like to address the document, okay? This document that is presented to you is a document that everyone on the committee agreed to as it is written, other than in Article 7, Section 4, in which you have two alternatives. If the committee did not agree as an entire consensus to what was documented, then you would have had another alternative there. The committee agreed to everything that's documented here. We took a consensus, we took a vote, everyone agreed, and if they didn't, there was an alternative. The only alternative was listed in Section 4. So I'm not sure where some of this conversation is coming from, because we agreed to this entire document other than Section 4 of Article 7.
So it may be worthwhile just maybe mentioning two things that have happened quite recently, where standing committees of the board have come forward with unanimous recommendations to the board, and they have been shut down. They haven't even been able to be entertained by the board. So the fact, as much as I appreciate what you've done, this was your job to do this, the fact that it was a unanimously approved decision by your committee does not bind the board to accept it as it is.
So I don't believe any of us are saying that. We are putting forth the draft of the bylaws. We are recommending that you approve them. What you do with them is up to you. We have no problem with this. We did what we were supposed to do. We're done. We can walk away from this. This is not our problem anymore. Not our horse, not our rodeo. It's up to you guys. And we all know that.
Okay, so this is supposed to be the only forum that we have for debating these things, right?
That's not what we said.
That's what I heard from Mr. Lenevsky, that this is
Director McAdam, this is not the only forum for the board to debate this. It's going to be a motion. Motions are debated on. This is one where we're trying to answer questions and find out a problem, if there exists. You've made it very, very clear that you don't like page 19 and some of those things. We are now aware of it.
Okay. Would you like to know about some other questions I have, or do you want me to save this for a later conversation?
If you think that if you think the committee can answer those questions because they're here, one of the members flew in, the other's on the phone who was going to fly in, you've got the entire committee.
Okay.
This is your opportunity to ask the committee questions. You can certainly debate me over the next few months if that's what it takes, but let's spend the time to ask questions of the committee so they can answer it.
Okay. Page 21. This is Article 9, the initiative, referendum, and recall petition. So there are three kinds of petitions that exist. An initiative, a referendum, and a recall petition. And I'm looking at Section 1, the application for petition form, letter D.
Hold on a second.
Page 21, Article 9, Section 1, the very bottom, letter D.
Okay.
So it seems as though, I'll read what it says. It says, a referendum or recall petition must set forth the existing policy, rule, or bylaw that is being challenged in clear language, da-da-da-da. Okay, so I completely understand, because a referendum is essentially a request to change an existing policy, rule, or bylaw. But what does it mean that a recall petition must set forth the existing policy, rule, or bylaw that is being challenged?
There has to be a reason for the recall. You can't just say, I want to recall Alan Lenevsky, end of sentence. You have to say, I want to recall Alan Lenevsky because, what did I do wrong? That's,
Okay, but what is...
and the limit, by the way, Director McAdam, the limit on that is, and this is based on legal advice, and I want to be clear to everybody, recall petitions would be allowed except in the place where they are illegal. And the reason for that is for us to sanction a recall based on an illegal procedure opens up us to liability.
Well, I
that was based on
understand
legal advice.
that's the reason that the discrimination language is there.
Correct.
But there are a lot of things that are neither policies, rule, bylaws, nor discriminatory that could be grounds for a recall petition. And it seems as though they're being excluded from this.
What's an example?
An abuse of executive power.
What?
That's a matter of opinion.
That would be.
An abuse of executive power. Pardon me?
That would be a violation of a bylaw because that would be covered in your parliamentary authority.
Can you explain that to me?
The bylaws make clear that the parliamentary authority, rule authority of this organization, of this board, is the current edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. And I don't want to try to use your words, the example you just gave, but what you just gave is covered in terms of the bylaws because it's in Robert's Rules of Order. If you are an elected officer, you have duties. And it's referred to that type of fiduciary duty is said a lot by this board. That isn't that commonly used in Roberts, but the duty of your oath of office, the duty of, or the responsibility of fulfilling your duties is talked about in many places of Roberts. So if you have an officer who is maybe guilty of what you said, that would be a violation of your bylaws because your bylaws refer to Roberts.
Okay, so when I wrote this, my response to you, I made an analogy to the concept of an impeachment. And somebody can be impeached from public office without having committed any crime. It's simply, we elected you to do something. We don't believe that you're doing that. We don't like the way that you're doing it. We want to recall you from office. And they can be impeached without any criminal justification for that. There doesn't have to have been any criminal, any determination of criminality at all. And I think this is actually one of the reasons there were 4 submissions for recall petition last year, and I guess part of it was this year as well, that were all denied, and part of it was you have to show which policy, which rule, or which bylaw was violated by the person who was being recalled. And I don't believe that Robert's Rules of Order and our bylaws cover all the things which the membership might feel, hey, you know, we voted you in thinking that this is what we were going to get. We're not getting that now. We want to recall you. And it's quite concerning to me because I think that this very much limits the ability of the membership to say, no, we want to undo the vote that we made.
Director McAdam, again, respectfully, I disagree. If this board passes these bylaws, even if the recall provisions are not exactly what you want, it improves the opportunity, it increases the opportunity for a board member to be recalled through a petition by trying, and I think everyone was clear, if possible, to get the board out of it completely. That is impossible because of the potential violations of law. We attempted to do that. So again, if you want 100% of what you want, and people are not willing to take 85 or 80 or 50% or whatever, then that's one thing. Are we moving it in the direction of giving the people more power, the members more power, including on the recall provisions. And I would like somebody from the board, of the committee, to address this. Are we doing that? In my view, that is yes. I didn't get 100% of what I wanted on this stuff. I determined that we are moving in the right direction, and we're moving substantially in the right direction. But I also know that if people are going to demand 100% of what they want, it's over. We're not going to get anything. We're going to go back to the bylaws that we had before. Everybody's going to be upset. Over 1,000 hours of the committee is going to have been wasted. So people on this board have a choice to make. Is what we did beneficial? I believe it is. I'd like one of the committee members at least, to address it, so it's not just me.
I would also jump in for just a moment to repeat what I said earlier with regard to recall, and that is you simply have to have a basis for recall, and that you will be issued a control number so long as your recall document does not involve any protected class. I don't think I could have been clearer. You make the recall document, you clearly state the bases, and you will get a control number, and the only cause that will cause you not to get that control number or to have your recall petition returned will be if you are trying to make a recall with regard to a protected class, period.
Except for I don't think that's what this document says. This document says that above and beyond that, you have to be able to name a bylaw, a rule, or a policy that's being violated.
You've just been told that the example that you offered was covered by parliamentary procedure, and if I heard what the parliamentarian responded in your response to her, it seems to me as if you do not even accept the fact that it's covered under parliamentary procedure.
Well, I don't. I mean, is being nasty, for instance, something that's covered by parliamentary procedure?
The word is, you must conduct yourself with decorum. And being nasty, making personal attacks, even if they're implied, if a reasonable person would be able to identify it as a personal attack, or the third one, goes out of my mind, I'm sorry.
Okay, but so I'm just saying, so just for clarification here now, if somebody addresses that and says that we don't believe that this person has acted with decorum or with impartiality or with the even-handed administration of justice, any of those things, that's covered, but there's no, so what has happened in the past is that they've been told that's a subjective judgment and we disagree with you, and as a result, we're not going to give you the recall number. So this would be my question. Is this what we're saying is now being clarified, that if somebody comes forward and says that, it's something that is a subjective judgment, but doesn't fall into any of the discrimination cases that we're dealing with? I understand that those are completely off limits. But would that recall petition number be issued under those circumstances where you could make an argument and say, we think that your subjective judgment is wrong?
I don't know how to be clearer. I really don't know how to be clearer. The intent of the committee was to take the board out and and have the number issued. Of course, with that, most likely will be a statement saying that RCSC is neither endorsing or not endorsing this thing as a thing. It was clearer that we don't, I don't want the board involved in that, except if we have to from a legal perspective. So you can interpret it any way you want. I'm telling you what we thought, and then do whatever you want.
This is Janet, and I think this is kind of an extreme example, but I think that I can't do a recall for any particular board member because I think she always wears a green shirt to the meetings. It has to be tied to something. I agreed to include this because I think you can pick out pretty much any phrase within the bylaws. You can find a phrase to put in for a reason, and you are given a number, and nobody has the authority to say that's an okay excuse or not an excuse. I think I've had some comments about the fact that it says yes or no. The petition has to say yes or no. That was our intention as a committee, that when it goes to a vote, that it would be a yes vote or a no vote. And we're talking about the votes of members, not board members. I think there's just some mistrust from things that have happened in the past, and we have tried to address that. But at the same time, in bylaws, you really don't want to use the word not. You can't do this, or you shouldn't do this. You want to have it positive, that this is the way it's going to be. I hope that helps.
Anything else, Karen?
Oh, it's 12:15 already. I think I might stop for today.
Okay, anything else from anybody else?
Now, I mean, this is your opportunity to change stuff if we need to change it.
Well, I guess I stand by all of the things that I wrote to you. You have my document there. I believe that I've been told that every individual member received the
I don't know if I'm speaking out of term, but
No, go ahead.
you as a board will be able to amend any of these things as you're voting through this process. So your opportunity to also change it at that time as well, where you don't have any part of that. This is your baby now.
Right. Well, that's why I'm asking about the procedure and what do we have to expect going forward. I understand this is a gargantuan task.
Yep.
There's no question about it, and I'm open to a variety of different ways that we could approach this. I guess I just am sort of concerned about what happens going forward. I keep sort of hearing from you, Kat, that if I disagree with you, then I've just disagreed with the community, and how can I dare to do that? And I'm sorry, I feel like I have to say when I disagree with what the consensus opinion of the committee was. But I've given voice to those in the document that I sent off to you. I mean, so here's like one very tiny thing, but since you're asking me what else there is, so in the articles of limitation or the conditions of limitation, how long a period of time has to pass before a particular motion can be brought forward, I think I wrote to you and said that if we say that the first Tuesday in March is the annual meeting, 4 years in a row, the next meeting will take place in 1 year minus 1 day. So if you set a limitation of 1 year, it means that you cannot come back at the next annual membership meeting and address something that was a topic at the previous membership meeting. But then the next year, because of the way the dates go, it's 1 year plus 5 days, and then you can go back to it. So one of my recommendations was simply saying, rather than making it a year, which means that 4 out of 5 years, you're not allowed to talk about any issues that were brought forward 364 days prior to that. Why don't we change it to 11 months so that at any annual membership meeting, you're able to address a topic anew that may have been brought forward a year prior?
Director McAdam, I think we can talk about that. Please realize, I know you only had 48 hours to make questions. We have only had your questions and the ones from the other directors since Monday. So my intent is to respond to those, but my time was limited to before today's meeting. So I think we will be talking about those things. I also would like to say that I feel that the committee agreed to bring this forth to the board for your consideration. I think that we felt the timing was that we needed to get something out, even if it wasn't perfect. That doesn't mean that we all agree with everything. Not sure really, we did have some votes that were 5-2 or 5-3 or something. Whether that's considered consensus or not is what we what is in this, this document. So it's up, they're all right. It's up to you as a board member.
Thank you. I guess one other thing, I'm just really concerned, you know, the impetus for all of this came from a membership that felt like their voice was being denied, their part in shared self-governance was being denied them. And as I look through this document, I'm just looking for places where I feel like my impression is different than Director Linefsky, for instance, who feels like this document adds so much to what membership can do and to what their impact can be on shaping this community. And I feel like almost the exact opposite. So I'm concerned, for instance, about the fact that you're limiting member time at the annual membership meeting to 1 minute. Sorry, you know, how many, what do we have? I understand you don't want to have a meeting that drags on for 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 hours, but to put something in there and say, okay, first of all, you know, you're not allowed to get more than 10 proxies. You're not allowed to speak for more than 1 minute. It's the cumulative effect of that looks to me like instead of trying to increase the input of membership into the governance of this organization, that we're actually trying to detract from membership opportunities to do that. So.
Yes, Dave.
I respectfully disagree, especially on proxies. You stated that X number of people brought in 100 or more proxies for the last meeting.
How do they know exactly how those people wanted to vote?
Good. Do I want 8 people making decisions for 33,000 people? That's not giving the members authority. That's concentrating it in a few. Now, what are you laughing at?
Because
No,
the alternative, you asked me the question, the alternative is to allow 5 people on the board to make the decision for 32,000 people. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but they're elected to do that.
Yeah.
No, you have somebody going out, you can get 8 people from a group who go out door to door and come in with 100 or more proxies per person. And they are, in fact, and they can propose anything they want and vote on it and pass it. Am I misstating your position? Yes or no? No, it's
So
not Karen,
Dave,
it is not an essay question.
I'm not going to allow you to force me into making a yes or no answer.
Why?
You're acting as though when somebody goes out and asks for a proxy vote, that there's some kind of hidden necessity for people to give them that vote. They actually go out and talk to their neighbors and explain the reasons for it and say, would you allow me to vote in your behalf if you're not coming? People don't just automatically sign proxy votes. They do it because they believe that the person who's collecting that proxy vote is going to act in their interest.
Dave, let me take this.
Go right ahead.
Okay. The purpose of this is to, A, lower the quorum so that it can be gotten, and B, to make sure that at least it is broad-based. So having 80 people having to get 10 votes each is not a big thing. It is better to do that and make sure it's broad-based than have one person show up with 800 votes. This thing, Karen, is a compromise. There are a number of people on that committee who wanted to keep the quorum the same. There were a number of people who wanted to do some other stuff. We said, what would be fair? Again, if you think that we went out of our way to limit the membership, then you are mistaken. In fact, one of the members of the committee is one of the people who made some of the proposals at the membership meeting. I'm sure that person did not come in and say, let's throw it in the air. Everybody on this committee acted in good faith. Everybody in this committee wanted to give the membership a way to do things. You may disagree with the tactics that were used, But I'm really proud of the work that this committee's done, and I think it opens it up to a whole lot of people and makes it more likely to have a quorum, makes it more likely to be broad-based. You may have come up with a thing that can be dealt with, which is the 364 days. No one tried to screw anybody on those 364 days. Nobody thought of it. When you see it, it's easily done. You could say, we're at the next annual membership meeting. There's a way to change those words. But the rest of the stuff, you and I have a different philosophy. Vote the way you want to. But I know this committee did what it could and fought to make sure the membership had a route to do things. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that they didn't do that. So what else would you like to say?
Well, can you just explain what the rationale is for limiting member comments to 1 minute at the annual membership
Yeah, actually,
meeting?
we can. That was thought about too, but I'll let Pat, you look like you wanted to say something.
I wanted to address Director McAdams, the point about the 1 minute. So the way it's set up right now is you have to have a quorum to be able to vote on whatever the motions are. And I felt strongly about this and argued that if this happened like it did at the December 13th meeting, and there happened to be 5 motions, if you allowed 3 minutes debate on each, unlimited people to come up and speak, okay, so maybe it would take an hour or 45 minutes or whatever, a long period of time to get the debate, and then we have to do the standing vote, and that's going to take some time. So there was a point at which I said, if it's 3 minutes apiece, whichever motion ends up being 4 or 5, you may lose your quorum anywhere along the line, and then you kind of arbitrarily punished somebody's motion by no longer having a quorum, so you can't vote on it. So then we said, well, what's realistic? Well, how about if 3 minutes isn't, should we go for 2 minutes? And I'm thinking, oh yeah, 2 minutes, maybe that reduces it. And then we said, some other people wanted 1 minute. And so finally, to get it done, to better ensure that no matter how many motions come up, that the members can hold the quorum and vote for every motion, we settled on 1, knowing that it's less than optimal. But there was no intent to diminish the members' participation. My reasoning was to increase the likelihood that any member's motion would get the same fair hearing as any other motion. That's where it came from.
Thank you.
Anything else before we close the planning session?
This is Janet again. I would like to say that I think that maybe our watershed moment was when we reached that compromise on the quorum. And I think I can stand behind that 100%, that we have made it a reasonable number, and yet at the same time that we are limiting the number of proxies, yet it is, in our opinion, or at least in my opinion, I think the rest of the committees, that it is achievable. And that's what we were all looking for. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Mike, it's up. Vice President Agee, it's up to you to close the planning session.
Okay. All right. I would like to thank everybody for attending today, and I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen, gavel. You guys did okay. Thank you.
This is a copyrighted production of the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated and is intended for the sole purpose of informing our Recreation Center members. Any duplication, copying, transmission, broadcast, or use, including electronic and social media, is strictly prohibited without the prior written consent from the Recreation Centers of Sun City Incorporated. Thank you for watching.